the belief that you have decided is like, I'm not willing to go there. It's unapproachable. I've already decided. I know I've got the truth. That's probably actually the one you should question the most.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I find the categories are religion. That's anything around the phenomenon of God.
Yep.
Man, people hold very tightly.
Tops.
Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah, and
number one, yeah.
I would say my willingness to explore that subject matter in great detail is one of the greatest blessings of my entire life.
On today's episode, we have Ryan Luelf on with us today, explains his journey, his overcoming of cancer in his life, what his perspective is on life, what drives him, what his passions are, and really just a wonderful episode of his journey and how he operates today versus how he operated before his cancer. So we hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening.
I'm Ryan Luelf, and my wife Caroline and I are high school sweethearts. Been together over 27 years. We live currently in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have 4 children. I'm 43. My wife's 42. We got married when I was 19 and she was 18. And our children, we have 3 boys and a girl. Our oldest son is Addison. He's 17. Then we have a daughter, 13, Atlanta. And then we have Arthur. He's 11. And then we have our surprise, Mr. Arrow. He is 19 months old.
All A's.
And the A-team, that's what I refer to them as.
Love it. All right.
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't think we necessarily were intending to do that, but we started with Addison, and then we found out we were having a girl next. So we thought, well, let's just see if we like any A names.
Sure.
And we were looking for something kind of unique and different, but we have a kind of a difficult last name. It looks like Luelf, but the U is silent, so you say it Lelf. But I mean, people screw it up all the time. So we were trying to be nice to our children and give them like a basic, easy name. So it's like Atlanta, like the city.
Yeah.
But you don't hear that very often.
No.
I think we've maybe
that's a cool name.
Yeah,
though.
right.
Yeah.
And then now we have 2 A's. So then when Arthur came around, it was like, well, we just might as well stick with that.
Might as well finish it
And
off
then
with
we
that.
assumed we were done. And then when the older 3 found out we were having a 4th, they insisted, like, it has to be an A name. So we started with a lot of different ideas, and I wasn't really liking any of them. And I'm like, listen, kids, we're not just going to name the boy some A name that I don't like.
Just to do it.
Okay,
yeah.
just to do it. And they're like, Dad, we can't be the A team if he doesn't have an A name. And I'm like, well, come up with something good, all right? And so we were just actually like sitting around the house one night, and my oldest son, Addison, was like, how about Arrow? And everybody was within like hearing distance. And I felt like within a very short amount of time, everybody kind of went, yeah. And I was like, is that a consensus? Done. We never
Deal.
considered any
Sign
other
the
names.
papers.
Yeah. And that was maybe 6-7 months into Caroline's pregnancy. So,
Okay.
yeah. So we play a lot of pickleball. We go all over. We've been already to Arizona, Utah, Texas, Kansas, Arkansas, Missouri, playing tournaments this year. And in fact, we were out here in St. George just a couple of months ago and just enjoyed our time so much, we decided to plan like a vacation. We brought my mom this time.
Oh,
and
cool.
when we came that time, we just had my daughter and the baby
Okay.
with my wife and I. So this time we brought all 6 of us plus my mom. She's never been to Utah before.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where's your mom live?
She
in
lives,
Oklahoma too?
about 3 miles away.
Okay.
My dad passed away 2 years ago of brain cancer.
Sorry to
So
hear that.
he had about a 15-year journey. It's crazy.
Wow.
So interesting how that coincided. You can imagine at one time, my mom was literally dealing with her oldest son, me, going through stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which we'll talk about here in a minute.
Right.
And at the same time, my dad was having his 3rd bout with brain cancer.
Oh.
Wow.
And there was a time where it was not looking like either one of us were going to make it.
Right.
I mean, so again, that uncertainty that we were talking about before we came on air, I can't even imagine what my mom must have felt internally, the thoughts of this is unfair. How could this happen to me?
What am I going to do?
Yeah. I mean, it'd be enough to lose a spouse, or it'd be enough to lose a son, let alone if you lost both.
Right.
Can you imagine in the same 6-month period?
My goodness.
Yeah, because I remember my dad was in the hospital, not doing well, and I was at an alternative cancer clinic in Mexico, not doing well.
Right.
And my mom couldn't be in two places at one. And I've just thought many times, like, wow, what was that like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay,
we owe your mom a hug. My goodness.
And when you guys get through this, then we'll have to go deal with the emotions she was storing during that time, right? All that fear and all that.
I mean, and I've seen this with my mom these last 2 years. Interesting enough, pain is the portal for transformation.
Right.
Yep.
But for some reason in society, we have this tendency that we want to run from pain or avoid it. And I think the invitation is to relook at the purpose of it and to say, I didn't make the universe. I didn't put this whole deal together. So I'm a guest. And a guest means I need to learn and observe and pay attention and then be okay with how it is, because it can't be any other way because I didn't put it together and I haven't figured out how to get
my house.
Not mine, yeah.
I haven't figured out how to get my own universe yet.
Right.
Yet, Kevin.
Yet. Yeah, same rules apply to if you're a guest in a home, right? It's not your home. You got to abide by
learn
those
the rules
and operate within the system.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes the rules don't make sense.
Right.
Sometimes I tell people it's not about breaking them, it's actually about getting rid of them. Because they're man-made. And they might have served a purpose to those humans or in that time.
Right.
But if they're not serving a purpose now, we don't just carry them on out of the name of tradition, which so many people don't realize how much internal freedom and power we have to, I mean, all of planet Earth is evolving.
Right.
Whether or not we as humans are choosing to be involved in our own evolution is a whole nother awareness, idea, and concept.
100%.
But the idea that things are evolving and advancing and changing, like life is dynamic. Planet Earth is always in motion. It's not static. So I think the more we all are open to that and embrace it and realize, again, that's just kind of how it works. So how do I partner with what I'm a guest in? Like if you go to someone's home and you want to have a great experience there, you partner with them. Right. They give you some ideas on how the party's going to go. Right. Or if you were going to stay with them for a week or a period of time, they would give you some guidelines or boundaries. And how would you have harmony? How would you make that experience as best as it could be?
Right.
You would co-partner, right? And there would be communication, there'd be give and take. It'd be like a dance. And I think life's very similar.
Yeah, and the possibilities that exist increase the more you partner with that home, those people, the energy, right? We'll just call it the energy. The more you partner with the energy, the more possibilities exist.
Yeah. So anyway, what I was going to say was that seeing my mom lose my father, 64 years of age is how old my mom was 2 years ago. She'd never lived alone because she got married basically right out of high school. So she went from living with her parents to living with my father, and then they were together 43 years or something. So imagine also then 64 and you're having to figure out what it looks like and what it means to be alone for the first time ever. And my encouragement to her was face it so you'll make it.
Right.
And meaning it was really tough in those first few months. It was so uncomfortable. Everything she did subconsciously and unconsciously that she had known was disrupted.
Yep.
So, but thankfully, because of my journey, which we're going to get into, I knew that if my mom could just sit in it, that it was temporary, that she'd find a new normal. She'd find a new comfort zone. she'd find a different way of being human. And I felt like for her, that was her best chance that if she ever decided she wanted to be in a relationship again, she would attract a much more stable and better human if she first learned how to be okay in her aloneness.
Right.
Otherwise, she would be looking for another human to fill a void that actually I believe was her responsibility to first fill for herself.
Right.
So kudos to my mom. I've never seen her this relaxed, calm, happy, joy-filled. She's just
Self-sufficient.
used it. Oh, yeah. She lives completely on her own. I mean, of course, we're right there if she needs
Of
us.
course. That's awesome.
And just little things that she's had to teach herself how to handle, how to do. Of course, we're right there to support her anytime she needs it.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how old you are.
No.
You could be 64 and maybe it's the first time life itself has gotten to a point that it's either grow or, man, it's going to be a rough go of it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
And that can come when you're a teenager. That could come in a midlife situation. It could come when you're a senior citizen.
Yep.
I don't think it matters.
No.
I
Nobody's
think,
immune, huh?
yeah, I think the question is, how am I going to respond? Because the unfolding of our life doesn't seem to be in our control.
No.
So I take it as it
Right,
comes.
right.
And my affirmation is I can navigate anything. It might be really hard. I might do a lot of crying. It might take years to get through it. I don't know. But I'm going to keep reminding myself so that I can live fearlessly.
Yeah.
Because could something happen to one of my children? It could.
Yeah.
Could something happen to me or my spouse? It could. I mean, we could go through the laundry list of things that people would be like, oh, that'd be so terrible, or what a tragedy, or.
Right.
But I don't want to spend any time worrying about whether those may or may not occur. So my confidence is in, if I have to face that, and I don't know if I will or not, I can navigate it. I'll make it through. And if you also realize the importance of companionship, relationships, and you value yourself, then what that does is it causes you to value fellow humans.
Right.
And when we value fellow humans, we realize there are going to be times that we're going to need to lean on others to be there for us during a challenging time.
Right.
And so it's give and take. Like, I was raised in a religious environment, and they always told us that it was more blessed to give than receive. But I think they might have just been a little off. I find it just as much a blessing to receive when you need to.
Right.
And if nobody was ever willing to receive, there wouldn't be any place to give.
Right.
So maybe, like, Kevin, is your arm more important than your leg?
Not necessarily.
So receiving is an equal component to giving.
Absolutely.
And there are going to be seasons in my human journey
exactly.
where I get the blessing of being in the giving role.
Yep.
And there's also the humility and the blessing of times when I'm in the receiving role.
Right.
And I actually need both.
And we're going to learn both, whether we like it or not, right? Because the universe is going to offer that to us, and we can either work with it, like you were saying, as a companionship, or we can fight it, and it is really difficult.
Right. It's give when you can give and accept when you can't give. Right?
Yeah.
Because, and now you're hitting a great point, because most people love to give, love to serve.
Sure, it's a dopamine hit.
Yep, service is a dopamine hit. In our studies, we see that, if I serve Ryan and your family, then I automatically get an increase of serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin.
Right.
Levels rise by like 200%.
Okay.
So I feel good. Then you get the same response because somebody's giving to you. That makes you feel good. Your family, anyone that witnesses that. And that's how one act of service or kindness can generate a ripple effect that can affect 750,000 people, which is a really cool thing.
Sure.
At the same time, it's those people have to be willing to accept giving and service from other people. And if they're not, they don't benefit in the like either. So it's a great point, because I think a lot of us are willing to give, willing to donate, willing to help wherever. But it's like, when you need help, are you open enough can you accept someone helping you?
Well, I think there's a couple of thoughts I'd love for us all to chew on.
Yeah.
One is, what about the component of your ego getting addicted and needing that? It's a difference in feeling gratitude that when you were authentically able to do something, you got what were all the terms? The
Serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin.
Okay, so how about feeling gratitude that those sensations come over me versus thinking I need that all the time?
Yes.
That's one component, I think.
Right.
And then the second component is it could actually be the opposite for a person receiving if their programming and conditioning actually leads more to a feelingness of unworthiness or shame or guilt, or a false humility of thinking like, oh, I wouldn't want to look like I need any help.
It's charity or
Yeah. And the truth is, I don't know that anybody can make it through life all by themselves.
No.
I sure can't.
No.
And I'm okay with that.
Right.
And I'm now in a place where I'm constantly doing my best to recognize, like, my wife and I are getting ready to practice something, and we're going to start with just a little 4-day trip first for her. But our goal is to get all the way up to 30 days where we allow one spouse to leave and go wherever they would like and do whatever they want, all the way up. We want to do it for 30 days. And the other one will stay home, run the household, handle the kids, do all the activities. And the idea behind it is, how in the world could I have full appreciation for all of Caroline's contributions until I go an extended period of time of them not being there? So why wait until, God forbid, she passes away for me to have full recognition and heightened gratitude for what an amazing companion, co-parent, lover, spouse, partner, everything. And so we got this idea, we heard about it from some other friends.
Okay.
And it's basically, you can create that. And so, we've all heard that saying, time apart makes the heart grow fonder. But contrast is how you feel heightened gratitude. So if I go a month without my spouse being there to do all the things I can't even notice. You can't help it. I don't intentionally take them for granted.
Right.
But it happens.
It's just done for you. You don't think about it.
Right. Now I can oh, wow, she always does this. Or, oh, wow, I'm not even having to think about that. Or, oh, man, how do I deal with 3 children at one time that all need me and there's no other parent here to do anything?
Right.
Then how much more do I feel empathy for someone that's potentially a single parent? How much more relatable am I to society and people that have had a completely different human journey? And how much less judgment? How much more can I imagine what it must be like to be in their shoes? And then how different do I show up then, day in and day out, because I've trained my brain to get put in those positions to gain that perspective?
I have a couple questions. Are you allowed to talk to each other while you're? Can you talk?
Yeah, I don't think we've got some stringent guideline or rules around it.
Yeah.
And
You're
at
just
this
gonna try it
point, we haven't obviously executed the full thing, but she's going to a pickleball tournament in July all by herself.
Okay.
And I requested, because I had to push her. She's more likely to let me leave versus her leaving. And I'm like, you're going in a day early. That way you can sleep in. You can go watch the pros ahead of time. You don't have to worry about me. You don't have to worry about your schedule. You ain't got to think about the kids. And then I'm like, and then you can play women's doubles with your partner. And then guess what? You are going to then, the next day you can sleep in. You can go shop, do whatever. And then you can just come home the next day. So and it was like she probably wouldn't completely initiate or do it on her own.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And here's the crazy thing, so that people aren't too impressed. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, I don't know if it's 10 years or 15 years ago, that I was the husband or the partner or the spouse that when she wanted to have a girls' weekend away, she used to be into scrapbooking. I used to give her a hard time about that.
Right.
And I was a real jerk.
Okay.
But I'm okay. I can own that.
Right.
That's where I was.
Right.
I wouldn't want to show up that way now.
Right.
But that's part of my evolution.
Right.
That's part of my
journey.
story.
Yep.
You can't get here until you get here.
Right. Well, and the other thing that I was going to mention is in listening to your story on the Solid podcast, I think you guys are probably that saying of open to everything and attached to nothing, or connected to everything and attached to nothing. Like, that's a really good theory for most people to like think about. But I think you guys as like individuals and as a couple really embody that, because, so you doing that doesn't surprise me. Not that I know you at all, just through, podcasts. But I think that hearing that is like, okay, you're not attached to that. So you're willing to try those kinds of things out because you're not attached to a way that life has to be, right?
Well, we get these ideas, and I tell Caroline all the time, like, we're not going to know unless we try it.
Right.
So I'm way more interested in sorting and sifting through ideas and trying them. And then I'm very comfortable. I don't care if I'm 3 seconds in or 3 weeks in, or I've got money invested. Like, there's oh man, I got to remember this. There's I think it's called the sunken loss theory.
Okay.
And for a lot of humans, the reason they have a hard time trying a lot of stuff is because if they invest their time, their money, their energy, the deeper they get in, even if they absolutely hate it and they know they don't want to go forward, they'll just keep doing it.
The more they're hanging on.
Because they don't, their perception is they would lose, they would have, it would be like wasted time or wasted money.
Right.
Like if you go to a movie and you're 30 minutes in and you're like, this sucks, right? You know what the best thing you could do? Get the hell out of there.
Right.
I mean, because otherwise you're just going to.
You're just wasting another
the
2
next
hours.
2 hours are going to suck even more.
You're going into more waste. Huh?
But your brain goes, I spent $14 on the ticket and I'm already here. And,
use it.
And you come up with all these ridiculous reasons as to why.
Right.
And I think the truth is you just don't know ahead of time. Your brain tries to tell you that it does, and it doesn't. So you don't know how anything's going to go. You don't know what you're going to feel. You don't know what kind of experience you're going to have. So I want to experience my experiences. I don't want to let my brain try to convince me that it knows ahead of time what I'm going to experience and then try to label that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
I just want to be open.
Right.
So I'm either going to be like, wow, that was really satisfying. I think I'd like to try that again. Or I'm going to be like, yeah, oh man, that was some big time contrast. Damn,
That was rough.
I am not doing that again. You know what I mean?
Done that. Don't have to.
But
go
how
back.
much better will that help you in the next experience?
Yeah.
And that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
That
And
is
all
really,
of
really
this
cool.
is it's all a byproduct
Yeah.
of being told at 35 years of age, you got 2 to 3 months to live.
Right.
So that was, now listen, I was a seeker. I was asking questions. I was someone who kind of pushed the envelope or didn't necessarily want to just go with status quo. So I was already bent in that way, I guess. I don't know if that started from childhood or where that point was in my life that I think most people would be like, oh yeah, Ryan's kind of, that. But you get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at age 35 in the prime of your life with 3 kids under 10. And the oncologist says there's no cure and this cancer is going to kill you and maybe as fast as 2 to 3 months. And it's like, from my perspective, all right, it's all on the table.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I tell people all the time, the belief that you have decided is like, I'm not willing to go there. It's unapproachable. I've already decided. I know I've got the truth. That's probably actually the one you should question the most.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I find the categories are religion. That's anything around the phenomenon of God.
Yep.
Man, people hold very
Tops.
tightly.
Tops.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and
number one, yeah.
and I would say my willingness to explore that subject matter in great detail is one of the greatest blessings of my entire life. And there are certain components that I still align with some things that I was taught. And then there's other areas that I would say, I see it differently. Doesn't mean I'm any more right than the way I was shown, right? But it feels so much better because I'm not dogmatic. I'm not clinging to it like, I found it. Because you can tell yourself all day long that you found it, and the real you knows that you haven't.
Yeah.
and it'll like kind of eat you alive
love
on the
that.
inside.
I love that.
Yeah, you're just bullshitting
Accurate.
yourself and other people.
I mean, accurate in a lot of instances, in a lot of circumstances, but especially I think on that topic.
And usually it's not because you really actually still believe it. It usually has more to do with how will my parents treat me if they knew I believed different?
Yeah.
What would happen to my circle of friends? You know, would so and so still invite me to this thing that I love going to if they knew I saw something a bit different than they do around that subject matter? So when you get down to a more practical way of looking at it, you realize that it's not that people really, really, really actually believe what they say they're going to believe. It's more of the fear of what all would unfold and what would happen if certain people in their life found out that they actually didn't really see it that way. And that's what's more scary.
Yeah, and that in all the people we work with, that change aspect, whether it's in that category or just with your personality, your person, your being, people have done things the same way their whole lives, and if you want to change and you want difference in your life, you got to look at what you're doing. And, to do something different, the same as, like, well, what are my parents going to think? What are my friends going to think? What am I, so I think it's applicable in a lot of different areas, but that's
I think
that's a great perspective.
The question, though, is what kind of relationship would you have if the only reason they're going to be nice to you or want a relationship with you is because they're under some false illusion that you think like them?
Right.
I don't want to settle for anything less than the real thing.
Right.
And so if you can't handle that I have questions and you can't handle that I'm not sure I see it the way you taught me to see it, and that's enough for you to decide that you don't want any type of relationship with me, we didn't have anything in the first place.
Then what? Yeah. Then what's it worth?
I'd rather know now than.
Yeah. And I would rather us go through a season where maybe we think, maybe the other person, maybe it's me, whoever thinks, well, then I don't want a relationship with that person. I would rather have the chance that I would lose a relationship, let's say with a parent or a sibling or a close friend, on the basis that we don't see eye to eye on some categories. And if we never get to have a relationship, I can live with that knowing at least I'm being true to myself.
Right.
But what my sincere hope is that the time that we're not in relationship together, it causes us to start seeing things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we go, okay, this isn't worth it. I don't really know for sure if my point of view and my belief is more accurate or more right than John's or Sarah's or whoever. And man, I miss being around them.
Right.
And I don't think it's worth it to argue over who's got the more accurate interpretation of whatever than it is to miss out on fun and family trips and whatever you do, connection and intimacy and just the joy. And what if I stopped being threatened by the fact that you believe differently than me? And what if I decided I was going to be fascinated?
Curious.
Yes.
Yeah. Intrigued and interested.
Because I've never spent 1 second in your shoes.
Right.
I really don't know what it's like to have lived your life. And even when I try to figure out what I think it would be like, it's all through my own filters and my own programming and my own conditioning and my own brain. So it's still nowhere even close to really what it's been like to have lived in your earth suit, in your environment, around the things your subconscious got exposed to.
Right.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't I be fascinated? Like, wow, interesting. How did you get to this point? Or why did you shift here? Or what caused you to all of a sudden decide you saw it differently?
Could you imagine the relationships that could be if people took that approach?
I have them. I have them.
For everybody,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's incredible.
And they'll put you to tears.
Yeah.
Like we were sitting at we were sitting at a restaurant in Vegas last night, and it was me and my mom and my wife, Caroline, and our 3 oldest kids. We got a babysitter for the baby because we went to dinner, and then we were going to a Cirque du Soleil show. And my daughter doesn't have a phone. We ask all of our kids to read 12 books of our choosing in order to get a phone. And she's not interested in doing that, so she doesn't have one. But my 11-year-old,
How old is she?
She's 13.
Oh.
wow.
But my 11-year-old son, he was motivated, so he read the book, so he's got a phone. And I thought maybe after he got one, she would want one. Nah, she's like an old soul.
Okay.
I'm loving it. It's really
That's
cool.
awesome.
That's awesome.
So we're at dinner. I asked my boys, please put your phones away. I put my phone away on silent. And I just said, hey, until we get back out to the vehicle and head to the show, I'm just asking you, like, no phones. Just put it on silent. I mean, what's really going to happen in the next hour and a half?
Right. Right.
And look, I'm just like anybody else. I don't always practice being present. I can get distracted from my phone. I can forget that the people I really love are right in front of me at the table, and I can be lost on some social media side. I'm just as guilty as anybody else.
Right.
But awareness is the path.
Yeah.
So I came up with this idea. I said, all right, we're going to do something. While the appetizers are coming out and while we're having dinner, I said, each person gets to ask one question, and then every person at the table has to answer. And then once we all give the answers, then the next person gets to come up with their question. Absolutely magical. Like stuff, like my mom was just in tears. Like the stuff that started coming out. Like my daughter shared something in the one question. I don't know that I knew it. She shared something that is a dream of hers. She wants to play in a band in college.
Okay.
I didn't know. I mean, I knew she liked band.
Sure.
I didn't know she loved band. And I just immediately, it was like overdrive of emotion. I thought, well, how can I support her?
Right.
And yet, how many times as parents are we trying to turn our children into something? Or we're trying to direct them in a way? What if we could let go of all of that and just let them discover a way and then go, hey, sweetheart, or hey, son, just so you know, you got the greatest backing you could ever have in the history of the universe. It's your dad, your mom. So however far you want to take that, whatever that looks like to you, just keep letting us know. And oh, by the way, if you change your mind, no problem, right? You're free. I don't own you.
Right.
You're your own individual soul. God, universe, source, they gave me the opportunity to play this role and to have a part in doing life with you.
Yeah.
And so,
Because really, when you look at it, we're not that much farther ahead than our kids, right? I mean, really?
maybe we're actually behind.
Right? I know.
Maybe
That's the
they're
kicker,
actually
right?
supposed to teach us.
Right? And that's, so it's like, okay, we're, a couple years maybe, but we're just, we're right here with you. Learning the same things.
Reminds me of what our 6-year-old daughter, Brooklyn, another city.
Yeah,
Right.
I love it.
What she said a couple months ago, I asked her to help pick up her toys or something. She goes, Dad, this is my life. And I was like, all right. I mean, touche. Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
She hears that verbiage and I love it because I'm like, you're right. I told her your shirt's on inside out. She goes, life is life. I was like, you're absolutely right. Picking up on those things like, so what,
Yeah, it's not an easy way to live. I don't want to act like it is, and I still have moments. I think
sure.
some people hear me share, and it's easy to get an impression that would be a little inaccurate. But, one of the questions at the dinner table was, what is your favorite part about your current life? And my answer was, for the most part, listen, we still have arguments. We have moments. We're human, just like anybody else. But my awareness right now of how most days is peaceful in our home, with our family, the people we do life with, there's an immense amount of harmony. And I just, compared to what kind of dis-ease and stress and anxiety and how high strung I was and the depression and the suicide note and just never feeling good enough and all of that build up to my cancer diagnosis at 35. And now to be 5 years plus on the other side and cancer free. And to be able to truly say that really is, for the most part, our ongoing experience.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I feel like it could have been 100 times harder and I'd been like, it'd still be worth it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And it was pretty damn hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, you know, when you get diagnosed with cancer, I'm sure you can imagine the overwhelming flood of fear, thoughts, questions, anxiety. I mean, it just rushes in like a tidal wave.
Mm-hmm. Playing out the worst case scenarios.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, every one of them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there was a stretch early in my diagnosis where I could not seem to get away from the bombarding of just thoughts about what is going to happen to my kids if they grow up without a dad? What is going to happen to Caroline if she doesn't have a spouse? Like, I've been the main provider, you know, how in the world is she going to provide and be a single mom and handle it all? I mean, and then, I mean, it just goes crazy on you. Like, what if she then meets another guy, and what if she's still vulnerable? And then what if he like abused her or hurt my kids? And I mean, the scenarios
The whole
are
gamut.
just
What's going to happen? How am I going to look and feel? What is this doing to the inside of my body? Like, what am I going to go? Like, all of it. I'm sure just so
Right. The
many
whole gamut.
scenarios.
Yeah. And so that was the point where I realized in some ways Caroline had her own journey as a supporter that was actually probably just as vital and just as important for her to embrace as I did, being the one who was physically going through the cancer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because she was
Absolutely.
doing everything she could within her power to help me not die.
Right.
And I was doing everything within my power to live and overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, she was going to be the one left with the hardest task
Right.
if I fell short.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just gone,
Only one would be holding the bag.
Right.
Yeah.
essentially. Yes.
For sure. Yeah.
And so then she's being bombarded with thoughts and fears and insecurities, right?
Yeah.
And it puts you in that fight or flight mode.
Which maybe even, you know, just like you said, just as difficult because she's having to show up with a smile too, with dealing with the same thing. So that's, you hear caretakers
Plus
go
carry the
through.
load. Yeah.
Right. I wonder in some ways if actually her role was harder than mine.
Right.
Because how much more out of control did she feel?
Sure.
You had one focus. I got to get better. And
Yeah.
she had to carry on life and all of the ongoings there and then fear that loss.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact quote, but it goes something like, you know, a healthy man has many options, but a sick man has one.
Yeah.
Or focus. You know, like
Right,
when you're sick, it's like, nothing else matters. I've either got to get well and find a path to overcome this and heal, or nothing else is going to matter.
Right.
I mean, you talk about getting locked in.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
There are no distractions.
Yeah. No.
I mean, it was 24/7 for 2.5 years. Right?
Wow.
Like how to.
And you went the alternative route too. So talking about, you know, that's not covered by insurance, or you guys had to figure out that end of things too.
We did. And I think it's just all connected in the sense of a friend of mine said, well, you know, why don't you ask people to support you? Do fundraising, right? You know, it's interesting. There are people that will post on social media and actually make fun of people who use like GoFundMe.
Right.
And so even the idea of fundraising can be scary,
Yeah.
even though I didn't know what else to do, right? We had just come off a total business loss. Our credit was shot. We didn't have any ability to borrow money. We didn't have equity in a home. We didn't have a whole lot of options. And
Like the worst timing.
yeah, and conventional medicine is saying, hey, you know, we don't have any cure for stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Like at best, if you can handle the chemo, maybe we extend your life, but it's going to come back. Then you're going to have to keep repeating treatment. You may or may not make it a few
super
more
sick
years.
during that time
Right.
anyway.
Who knows what your quality of life's going to be like.
Right.
So it's not like when I decided to say thank you, but no thank you, I'll see if I can carve my own path. It's not like I was turning down a great option.
Right. Yeah.
I was turning down a pretty subpar option.
Bleak.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I was just saying, well, I don't really have anything to lose.
Yeah.
And I remember early on, someone said, you've been on the planet for 35 years. You haven't had any health challenges. And look at all that you've experienced already.
Mm-hmm.
So before you feel like a victim, before you start thinking this is unfair, how many people who didn't make it to 35 would do anything to already have your life, even if it came to an end right now?
Perspective.
Yeah.
Damn.
Wow.
So that's where I started.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I want to live, but I can only do, all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough.
Yeah.
Because, and if I fall short and my runway runs out, I'm going to, might as well just
hang your hat on. You did all you can do.
Well, I decided that if my kids were going to grow up without a dad and my wife was going to be left a widow in her 30s, that if I couldn't find a way, and I did fall short and I passed on and I left my earth suit, my body, and I wasn't here anymore in physical form, that I wanted them to at least have the mental, emotional, and psychological memories that their dad and their husband did everything within his power to see if he could turn it around, if he could overcome it. And that he was willing to face hard things. He was willing to grow. He was willing to take personal responsibility. And if nothing else, hopefully that would be something inspirational that they could take into what was going to be a challenge. Right. Wouldn't be easy to be 3, 4, 5 years old, 7, 8 years old, 9, 10 years old and lose your dad.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to come with some challenges.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not going to be easy to be 34 years old and think you got your whole life in front of you with your life partner and your provider and your co-parent, and then be left to handle all of that on your own and to navigate that. That's going to be challenging.
Right.
So they're going to have to draw on something from within. And I thought, I sure wouldn't want to leave them that I lived in victim consciousness and I gave up and I threw in the towel and I complained and bitched and moaned, and that's what they were left with. Because I couldn't know for sure whether I could make it or not. I believed I could, and I thought I could do it, but I didn't know for sure.
No certainty.
No
right?
certainty.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt like I could go about it in a way that either they would have me here or they would have something they could draw on for the rest of their time.
Oof.
It's powerful.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And so when I was going through immense pain, I lost 50 pounds. I had this horrible fluid problem. The first 2 years I was in the ER probably 50 times. For a 7-month stretch, I was having 10 to 15 liters of fluid, drained out of me. I mean, pain like I've never experienced. It's interesting. I'm a small man of stature, nothing like you, Kevin. I'm like half of you, right? But here's the thing. So I was like picked on, in school, being smaller, thrown in lockers. I remember kids giving me a hard time. And so I kind of developed a self-concept of like being like a wuss, you know what I mean? Like kind of like a weenie, you know what I mean? Right? Dude, I ain't no weenie, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
overcame
I
that.
found out I was tougher than anything I could imagine.
Right.
I mean, just realizing the pain that I had to endure, for a very extended period of time, and to still somehow in my mind believe we were going to somehow find a way when it didn't
And
look like
not
things were
wish
getting
for it
better.
to end because you were in so much pain.
Yeah, I do remember one specific time where I looked at Caroline one night and I said, listen, I am not giving up by no means, okay? But I'm telling you, we've got to find some relief. I don't know how much longer. I was enduring, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't sleep. I was so uncomfortable. The pain was 24/7, And even sometimes
Was
with
that from the treatment or from the cancer?
a lot of it was the cancer and the fluid problem, especially in the abdomen area. If you looked at some of the pictures, I was down to about 118 pounds, and the fluid caused my belly to make it look like I was like pregnant or like a very malnourished. You ever seen like
Ethiopian?
yes, yeah.
Or like E.T.
And so, I mean, and so it was just pushing out on
Were
my
you
stomach.
retaining fluid?
Yes, and then it was also building up in my lungs.
Yeah.
So then to try to lean back, let's say, to take the pressure off my abdomen would cause the fluid to move up into my lungs, and then I would have these horrible coughing attacks. So then I'd need to set back up to not cough, and then that would put all the pressure right back on the abdomen. So it was like a teeter-totter, and nowhere could I find comfort.
Were you at home or were you in a treatment center when this was going on?
Most of the time at home. Sometimes I would have been in Mexico at Chipsa Hospital at an alternative clinic.
Okay.
And
So did they send you home on a regimen that you just followed like a home?
Yeah. I mean, and just because we won't have time on the podcast, I mean, I still have my wife's blog. I pretty much shared updates on my Facebook in real time, pretty much through the entire journey, 2.5 years.
Okay.
And Caroline put a blog out, I'd say probably at least once a month. There's probably 50 to 60 blog posts over 2.5 years. Oh, wow. And that was her outlet to kind of release all of her emotions. But it also is like, if anybody ever wanted to go read all the details of everything we tried and the amount of money we had to raise to cover and pay for it all, and the things that we did and the things that worked and the things that didn't seem to work. I mean, the way I like to summarize it is the first like year and a half, I would say we were mainly focused on all external changes, diet change, treatments, therapies, supplements, vitamins. And listen, I'm grateful for all of that. And I do significantly believe they played a role.
Sure.
Let's say, if anything, they bought me time.
Right.
But it was really at about year 2 that I just couldn't figure out why I wasn't better. I felt like I had made every possible change you could make. I had been willing to do things that didn't appear most cancer patients would have ever been willing to do or try. And I just had this sense like, I think I should be better by now. And so for a moment, I got pissed off and I was upset. And then it was like, nah, that's not going to get me anywhere. So I think by this time I'd gotten introduced to like Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton. I'd started reading some books. I was getting introduced to these new ideas and new concepts. And so I got this idea that I think I need to talk to the cancer. So that's what I did. And I basically just internally said, okay, cancer, what is it that I'm missing? What are you wanting to show me? What do I need to learn or discover that I don't understand yet so I can get better? And it was like the wisdom started to flood in. Seek and you will find. Now, I didn't know how I was going to get the answer, but I earnestly wanted it to come. And so as it started to come, I was ready to receive it. I had eyes to see it, ears to hear it, and a mouth open to receive. And so what started to happen was I started to realize that most of the world believe that cancer is an outside invader that randomly attacks people with cosmic bad luck. And if that is the case, then the only way someone would overcome that and get better was they would need random good luck.